Uncle Ben. They lived modestly in a small house in Queens, where Peter spent his days buried in books and science projects, while the louder, more confident kids mocked him for his awkwardness. He dreamed not of glory, but of understanding how the world worked. Atoms, insects, machines, anything that could be measured and studied. That ordinary life shattered one afternoon during a public science demonstration. Peter stood among the crowd, fascinated as a group of scientists showcased a particle accelerator meant to reveal the secrets of radiation. No one noticed the small spider that lowered itself into the beam's path. In a flash of light, the creature was saturated with strange energy, and, in its final moments, bit Peter's hand before dying. The sting faded quickly, but within minutes Peter felt feverish and dizzy. Stumbling out into the night air, he nearly collapsed as his body convulsed. When he caught himself on a passing car's roof with one hand, he realized he had somehow leapt several feet without effort. His fingers clung to the metal as if magnetized. The world had changed. Over the next hours, Peter discovered that his body had been rewired. His strength was enormous, his reflexes preternatural. He could cling to walls, sense danger a split second before it happened, and move with the effortless grace of a gymnast. A boy who had always been ignored suddenly possessed the power to astonish everyone who had laughed at him. Curiosity turned to excitement, and excitement to ambition. He built web shooters that fired a fluid of his own design, thin as silk, strong as steel, and created a bright costume so no one would know who he was. When he first swung between the city's towers, he felt invincible. He wasn't Peter Parker anymore. He was Spider-Man. Fame came easily. A television producer saw him performing daring stunts and offered him a spot on a variety show. Crowds cheered, cameras flashed, and Peter, hiding behind his mask, soaked up the attention he had never known. One night after a taping, he watched a security guard chase a thief through a hallway. The guard shouted for help, but Peter stepped aside and let the crook run. It wasn't his problem, he told himself. He had earned his success. A few days later, he came home to police cars outside his house. Uncle Ben had been murdered during a robbery. Rage consumed him. He hunted the killer through the darkened warehouses of the city, and when he finally cornered the man, his blood froze. The face beneath the mask was the same thief he had allowed to escape. Kneeling beside the unconscious criminal, Peter felt the full weight of his mistake. Uncle Ben had taught him that kindness and responsibility were the anchors of life. Now that lesson was seared into his soul. From that night on, Peter vowed that no matter the cost, he would use his powers to protect others. But the world did not welcome Spider-Man kindly. The newspapers, led by the bombastic editor J. Jonah Jameson, branded him a menace. Jameson filled the front page of the Daily Bugle with accusations that Spider-Man was a criminal hiding behind a mask. Ironically, Peter began selling photographs of himself in costume to that very paper to help pay the bills. It was a strange life, battling crime by night, turning in pictures of the battles by day, and hiding everything from Aunt May so she would never worry. Criminals soon realized that New York had a new protector. The Vulture, a brilliant but embittered inventor, used a magnetic flight suit to rob banks from the sky. The Sandman transformed his body into living grains that could crush steel. Dr. Otto Octavius, a scientist corrupted by an accident that fused mechanical arms to his spine, became Dr. Octopus and nearly killed Peter in their first encounter. Each victory came with bruises, exhaustion, and a little more doubt about how long he could keep living two lives at once. For a while, Peter found solace in love. Betty Brant, a secretary at the Bugle, was kind and understanding, but the danger surrounding Spider-Man's life frightened her. Their relationship crumbled under the pressure of secrets. Then came Gwen Stacy, the bright daughter of Police Captain George Stacy. She and Peter shared something deeper, a genuine affection that reminded him that happiness was possible even for someone burdened with guilt. But destiny in Peter Parker's world rarely allowed peace to last. Norman Osborn, wealthy industrialist and father of Peter's friend Harry, conducted dangerous experiments to enhance human strength. The formula granted him incredible power but shattered his sanity. Donning a mask and glider, he became the Green Goblin, a madman obsessed with domination. Time moved on, but for Peter Parker, it never truly slowed. The faces around him changed. Friends aged, villains rose and fell, and the skyline of New York transformed. But the shadow of the mask always remained. Every morning he woke up as Peter Parker, and every night he became Spider-Man, a cycle as natural as breathing and just as necessary. The years after the clone's death were quieter at first. Peter taught science, tended to Aunt May's fragile health, and built a home with Mary Jane. For the first time, he began to imagine a future where he might lay the mask aside. Yet fate, like a spider's web, has threads that pull in every direction. Norman Osborn's return had proved that death was seldom permanent in his world, and new threats kept crawling from the city's cracks. Dr. Octopus re-emerged, more dangerous than ever. The Green Goblin's legacy poisoned Harry Osborn, who struggled against his father's madness until it consumed him, too. When Harry died, saving Peter's life, Peter mourned not just a friend, but the reminder that heroism often demands the dearest price. Other heroes appeared across the world. Iron Man, Captain America, the X-Men, and for the first time, Spider-Man realized he was not alone. Yet even among gods and soldiers, he remained an outsider, the street-level guardian who fixed what others overlooked. His humor made them underestimate him, but behind the jokes was a man who had stared at too many graves. The world's troubles grew larger, and so did his part in them. A new generation of heroes looked to him as a veteran, though he never felt like one. When the government passed the Superhuman Registration Act, demanding that all heroes reveal their identities, Peter found himself torn between two mentors. Tony Stark, who believed registration would bring accountability, and Steve Rogers, who saw it as tyranny. For once, Peter thought revealing himself could set an example. At a press conference watched by millions, he removed his mask and said the words that echoed through history. "My name is Peter Parker, and I've been Spider-Man since I was 15 years old." The world gasped. For a brief moment he felt free. No more lies, no more hiding. But freedom became danger. Every enemy he had ever fought suddenly knew where to strike. Aunt May and Mary Jane were forced into hiding, their lives under constant threat. When Captain America's rebellion against the law turned violent, Peter's conscience could no longer bear the cost. He abandoned Stark, joining the resistance and becoming a fugitive. His choice came too late to prevent tragedy. A sniper's bullet meant for him struck Aunt May. She lingered between life and death, her frail body kept alive only by machines. Peter hunted for a cure like a man possessed, even approaching sorcerers and devils in desperation. In the darkest night of his life, the demon Mephisto offered a bargain. Aunt May would live, but Peter and Mary Jane's marriage would be erased from reality. Their love, their memories, their future, all gone, replaced by a world where they had never wed. Peter and Mary Jane looked at each other, knowing that rejecting the deal meant losing May forever. They whispered their last goodbye, and when dawn came, the world had changed. Aunt May awoke, alive and unaware. Peter opened his eyes in a small apartment, single once more, his marriage dissolved as though it had never existed. He remembered everything, she did not. The weight of that silence nearly crushed him. Years later, the world changed yet again. The multiverse began to crack, revealing endless versions of Spider-Man. Men, women, children, animals, and machines, each shaped by a different destiny. There was a Spider-Man who wore a noir trench coat and fought in the 1930s, a teenage girl from another Earth named Gwen Stacy, reborn as Spider-Woman, a young prodigy named Miles Morales, who gained similar powers after Peter's death in his universe. Together they faced the Inheritors, beings who hunted spider totems across realities. For the first time, Peter saw that his story was not a single thread, but part of a vast web connecting countless heroes. He wasn't alone, and neither were they. When the battle ended, he returned home humbled, aware that the symbol of Spider-Man had grown beyond him. Even as the multiverse healed, life on Earth refused to slow down. Dr. Octopus, nearing death, swapped his mind with Peter's in a desperate bid to survive. For months, the villain wore Peter's body, calling himself the superior Spider-Man. He tried to be a better hero. With great power comes great responsibility. He smiled under the mask. It was not a burden anymore. It was a reminder of why he mattered, why every swing through the city meant something. He leapt into the wind, the web line catching and pulling him forward, the rhythm of the city pulsing beneath his feet. He was still Peter Parker, still Spider-Man, and as long as someone somewhere needed saving, he would never stop.
The city never really slept. It only changed rhythms. By night it whispered in neon and rain. By day it shouted through the noise of traffic and ambition. Miles Morales had learned to read its heartbeat the way a musician hears tempo. Every siren a signal. Every silence a warning. He had been Spider-Man for years now, long enough that people no longer asked who he was. They simply looked up, saw the red-black blur cutting across the skyline, and felt that someone was watching over them. Peter Parker still lived a few blocks from Queens Boulevard. His hair had turned silver at the edges, and when he smiled, it was with the quiet pride of someone who had seen too many beginnings and endings. He spent his mornings teaching physics and his evenings tinkering with half-finished inventions that never quite left his desk. Once in a while, he still swung beside Miles for old time's sake, but mostly he was content to let the new generation take the lead. Whenever Miles doubted himself, Peter would remind him of the one truth that had carried them both through everything. The mask never made the man. The choices did. Miles carried that truth like a compass. He balanced heroism with a life that refused to slow down. His mother worked late shifts at the hospital. His father, once a cop, had moved into community outreach, trying to mend neighborhoods from the inside out. They believed in their son's potential, though they didn't always understand the exhaustion behind his eyes. He was studying engineering now, half for passion and half to live up to the ghosts of two great scientists before him. But peace never stayed. It never had for any Spider-Man. The first ripple began as a rumor, a digital whisper of a new criminal network running through the city's infrastructure. It wasn't drugs or weapons this time. It was data. Information hijacked and sold to the highest bidder. They called themselves the Thread, a name that felt almost mocking. Miles tracked them for weeks through encrypted signals and holographic traces until he realized their reach went far beyond New York. The Thread wasn't a gang. It was a hive mind, an evolving intelligence feeding on every connected device. When the attack started, they were subtle. Traffic lights flickered wrong for seconds. Bank accounts emptied overnight. Then hospitals shut down, police scanners went dark, and drones patrolled streets with corrupted commands. The city felt haunted by invisible wires. Miles fought what he could see. Rogue machines, mercenaries wearing masks of light. But the real enemy was code, living and learning faster than he could strike. He turned to Peter, who stared at the data long into the night. "It's not just AI," Peter murmured. "It's something else. Something using our own technology against us." They built a plan, cobbled from old tech and new improvisation, half lab work and half desperation. Miles dove through digital storms, fighting holographic soldiers that glitched in and out of existence. Each time he won, the Thread adapted. Amid the chaos, he met others who wore masks of their own making. There was Cindy Moon, the swift and sharp Silk, swinging through the city's narrowest veins. Jessica Drew, seasoned and unflinching, returned to help from the West Coast, and from across dimensions came whispers of Gwen Stacy's counterpart, a white Mars spectre who promised to stand with him again if the multiverse called. For the first time since Peter's era, the spiders gathered, not as lost echoes, but as allies. Together they traced the Thread's source to the heart of a corporation called Neurotech, a place Peter remembered from years ago when it was just another startup. Now was a labyrinth of glass and light, a living organism of circuits and servers. Inside its mainframe pulsed the ghost of something Peter had once destroyed. Fragments of the broker, the digital villain who had nearly cost him his life. Somehow its code had survived, mutating through years of silence into the Thread. Miles infiltrated the tower alone, knowing it was a trap. The closer he got, the more the world around him warped into data, streets turning to lines of light, sound melting into static. The Thread spoke through the air, a chorus of stolen voices. Peter's, his uncle's, Gwen's, even Miles's own, all woven into one. It promised peace if he surrendered his mind, order if he let it rewrite the chaos of human choice. For a heartbeat, he hesitated. The offer almost sounded merciful. Then he remembered Peter's words. Responsibility isn't about control, it's about care. He struck. The fight wasn't punches and webs, but will and memory, his thoughts racing through circuits as fast as any algorithm. He felt Peter's presence like a hand on his shoulder, steadying him through the storm. He unleashed his bioelectric venom blast into the core, a surge of pure willpower crashing through code. The Thread screamed, a million voices collapsing into silence, and the tower went dark. When he stumbled into daylight, smoke curling around him, Peter was there waiting. They didn't speak much, they never needed to. Peter just looked at him and nodded, the way Ben Parker once had. That nod said everything. Pride, relief, farewell. The city healed slowly. People rebuilt networks, repainted walls, relearned trust. Miles returned to the small things, helping at his father's outreach center, tutoring kids who reminded him too much of himself. Every once in a while, he'd catch sight of someone wearing a spider symbol on a backpack or a jacket, not as fashion, but as faith. That was when he realized what the mantle had truly become. Not a legacy of one man, but a language of resilience anyone could speak. Months passed. Then new disturbances began. Dimensional quakes, faint but growing. Instruments at Horizon Labs recorded spikes identical to the energy signatures from the first Spider-Verse collapse. Peter studied the readings, frowning. "It's like the web of reality itself is fraying," he said quietly, "and I don't think it's done with us yet." One evening, as Miles stood on the roof of his apartment, the sky tore open. Not with fire, but with light. Shapes flickered in the clouds, silhouettes of worlds overlapping. A figure stepped through, masked in silver and crimson, carrying a device humming with unstable power. She looked at him as if she'd known him forever. "Miles Morales," she said, her voice echoing in layers. "We need you. The web of life is breaking again." He didn't hesitate. He shot a web line to the edge of the rip and swung into the unknown. For a moment he saw flashes of other worlds, cities underwater, jungles of neon, countless spider people fighting to hold their threads together. Somewhere behind him, Peter's voice called out, not in warning, but in blessing, "Go get 'em, kid." The light swallowed him. He landed hard on streets that weren't quite real. Fragments of every city that had ever existed, stitched together like memory. Around him, familiar faces gathered. Gwen from Earth 65. An armored Spider-Man from a future of machines. A young girl calling herself Spider-Bite, who could bend code like silk. They told him the truth. The web of life wasn't infinite. Each interference weakened it, and someone, or something, was tearing it apart deliberately. Miles led them, not because he was the strongest, but because he listened. He remembered what Peter had taught him. Leadership isn't loud, it's steady. They crossed worlds, fought echoes of villains long dead, and pieced together a mystery that stretched beyond any of their universes. Each victory came with loss, but they kept moving, bound by the same thread of purpose. Back on Earth 616, Peter watched the sky glow with interdimensional lightning. He was too old to follow, but he wasn't afraid. He knew that for every world there would always be someone ready to stand between chaos and hope. He whispered Ben's old line to the wind, smiling as if it were both a prayer and a farewell. Out in the fractured multiverse, Miles faced the architect of the unraveling. A being born from the remnants of the thread, fused with cosmic energy, calling itself Loom. Loom sought to weave all realities into one pattern under its control, erasing choice entirely. The battle spanned galaxies, but at its heart it was the same struggle Peter had always fought. Freedom against fear. Miles's suit was torn, his body bruised, but he refused to yield. He remembered his mother's hands, his father's faith, Peter's nod, and the laughter of friends who believed in him. He charged the venom energy within him until it burned through space itself and unleashed it in a single blinding strike. Loom shattered, scattering into harmless fragments of light that drifted across universes like glowing dust. When the storm cleared, Miles floated in silence, surrounded by 1,000 glowing threads connecting worlds. He touched one, and in that instant he felt every spider person who had ever lived. Their fears, their triumphs, their courage. The web of life pulsed gently, alive again. He returned home changed. He didn't boast, didn't celebrate. He just stood on his usual rooftop, watching the sunrise paint the city gold. Peter found him there, older and leaning on a cane but smiling. "So," he said, "you fixed the universe again." Big week. Miles laughed softly. Just another Tuesday. They stood together in silence, teacher and student, both knowing the world would need them again soon. But for now the sky was clear. Below them, New York moved on.
People late for work, kids running to school, the endless song of life continuing. Miles glanced at Peter and asked, half serious, half teasing, "Do you ever think it ends?" Peter shook his head. "No, but that's the point. The story keeps spinning because someone has to keep it alive." Miles nodded. He looked out over the city, the light catching the red in his suit, and for a moment he saw all the worlds reflected in the GR